Good morning, team.
Good morning.
Welcome
Morning.
to the Civil Service Data Challenge semi-finals. We're all very excited to hear your pitch. So, over to you.
All right, I'll go. So, good morning. My name is Eric and I work for HMRC in the Employers Office. I noticed my team were receiving a lot of misdirected letters and I wondered how much post was misdirected, how much time this was wasting, and how it affected our customers. So here's our typical customer, Melanie. She wants to claim a refund from HMRC, so she writes us a letter. And each year we get about 9 million letters. Melanie's letter is scanned and categorized according to a crude keyword system. And we found that 40% of letters don't reach the right team first time. So we have to recategorize the letter to a different team, hopefully the right one, but there are more than 900 teams to choose from. And each extra step in the journey adds an average 20 days to the customer's waiting time. Our survey said, So while HMRC are playing pass the parcel, our customer Melanie is wondering what's happening with her letter, and we get a lot of complaint calls about delays. And well, eventually the letter does reach the right team and they process the refund and send a check back to the customer. It is her money after all. And Melanie has been waiting a long time. So our proposal is to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to take advantage of our massive archive. We have more than 60 million letters on file. We know their contents, we know the right teams where they were processed, we know the wrong steps they took on the journey there. So this represents the collective knowledge of all HMRC employees, and we would train a computer to tap into that unused resource. There we go. So that's machine learning in action there. So the computer knows as much as HMRC employees. So then when a new letter comes in, the computer can effortlessly remember, oh yes, this is very similar to a letter we got 3 years ago, and send it straight to the right team. That's much more efficient, there's no more guesswork, and it means less delay for the customer. Everyone's happy, even the robot. So in my research, I did find some answers to my questions. In the last tax year, there were 4.7 million recategorizations. The vast majority of those were unnecessary extra steps. The average transfer only takes 2.8 minutes, but that all adds up to £2.4 million in wages. And the total customer waiting time was 213,000 years. No wonder they complain. So now we can go into more technical details about the problem and our solution.
Great. So we're going to talk about the Digital Mail Service, or DMS for short, before we talk about the actual solution. So the DMS itself right now receives correspondence in two forms, physical and digital. Physical correspondence is what our solution pertains to. It's addressed to 100 different addresses, which leads to confusion. And this is really important to bear in mind because the postcode something is sent to decides or helps to decide what queue it ends up in. The mail is then handled by a private company called Restore PLC. They will open the mail, scan it, extract text, and then use HMRC supplied keywords along with the postcode to decide what queue it should initially end up in. Once that process has happened, HMRC processing teams allocated to each of these queues will use a recategorization tool to sort of go, is this letter in the right place? Is it in the wrong place? If it's in the wrong place, they'll then go through an exercise of rearranging it. Crucially, the DMS or the database system on HMRC's end only contains the image data, not the text or the postcode stuff that was extracted. This tends to lead to a bunch of shortcomings. For example, with 100 different addresses, you're likely to get correspondence sent to an incorrect address. As a result, you're likely to end up with mail routed to the wrong team. Secondly, people will put lots of correspondence into a single envelope to save money. As a result, everything that's sent in one envelope ends up in one queue, so you will end up with issues down the line. Secondly, a lot of the information that we alluded to, the extracted text, the postcode information that helps make these decisions isn't passed over to HMRC. Furthermore, we alluded to keywords being used. These keywords are not unique to Teams and they are very difficult to update because of layers of bureaucracy. So Eric has alluded and in his work has suggested it's very hard to get these keywords changed. And finally, HMRC employees go through this exercise of manual recategorization, but it tends to be problematic because if they were to leave, they would take this information with them and they can get it wrong. This isn't a foolproof system. So you end up with a high volume of recategorizations regularly. During this work, we spoke to various stakeholders, internal and external to HMRC. Internal to HMRC, the DMS team and operational excellence helped us to understand how the solution could be deployed, what the DMS looks like in its current form, and how the performance of the contract with Restore PLC is currently handled. We also spoke to data protection, who helped us figure out what due diligence we'd need to do to use this personally identifiable information. And we also worked with DWP on a small call for them to understand and appreciate that they were also having similar problems and looking at approaching this problem in similar ways. I'm now going to hand over to George for the solution.
Yep. So the aim of our solution is to replace the human correspondence categorization in a DMS with machine learning instead of using humans or using a sort of out-of-date static keywords. We propose a solution will extract text from images of mail items using open source optical character recognition, as this data is not stored or provided by the scanning provider. The solution will use the millions of records of historical data in DMS to train a classification model using openly sourced algorithms, which then route new mail to the correct recipients. The solution will dynamically categorize mail based on patterns that determine which teams items have ended up in the past, as learning from past behavior, rather than using static keywords that become out of date or humans that take time to view and decide where the mail goes and often get it wrong. We'll use AWS technology such as Amazon SageMaker to train and deploy our machine learning models and conduct any analysis. Next slide. As you can see, our solution will bolt on to the existing DMS system, which will sit on the same AWS environment as the rest of DMS, and I'll explain the benefits of that approach in a moment. Next slide. We think this is a feasible problem because document classification, by and large, is a solved problem in research. And the crucial thing that you need for these type of solutions is large amounts of historical data to be able to train your machine learning model. And as Eric has said, we have millions and millions of records of that where it's already labeled and we know where it should have ended up in the end. We'll be able to provide success metrics to relevant stakeholders, such as the accuracy of our model, which is based on the number of correctly classified items, as well as the performance, based on the number of items automatically sorted, which reduce customer waiting times compared to if they were managed by a human. As also previously alluded, the solution will use the same AWS cloud environment as DMS, so we won't require taking any data outside the platform they currently use, which will resolve some problems around data protection and security. We also propose to run this in parallel to DMS, so it won't impact daily operations in DMS, and we'll also be able to update models periodically to gain sort of new information. Next slide. We've evaluated key obstacles around legislation, privacy, technology, and security. I won't go into full detail here, but crucially, we're extending the same AWS cloud environment used by DMS already, so it will avoid sort of the data protection issues and security issues, and also using kind of open-sourced algorithms from a technological perspective. Next slide. We estimate the costs to be about, for a 6-week discovery, to be $2K for running the AWS infrastructure, the extension of the solutions that we need to run that, and about $48K for a data scientist and data engineer working full-time, and an architect and project manager running part-time.
Right, in the interest of time, I'm going to move us to the conclusion because Eric will touch upon similar things.
All right. So the digital mail service is currently not working very well. We have a practical method to tap into an unused resource that would save money and reduce waiting times and could be expanded to other departments. We think our solution is well worth pursuing further. thanks for listening. And now we can take your questions.
Really interesting team, thank you very much. Who would like to kick us off with questions?
I've got, yeah, go on. First of all, thank you very much. So I'm Aydin. I'm going to leave my biases at the door, but I thought that was fantastic. Can I just ask about you spoke to operational excellence around the Restore contract. Yeah. Does that provide any challenges in terms of this solution and is there something that's happening within the black box of Restore that you need to overcome?
Eric, would you be able to jump in on this one?
Well, they are an outside company. They open the mail, scan it, send back any valuable documents like certificates and things, and they use optical character recognition, OCR, to pull out keywords. The main filter is the postcode that it comes in on.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the kind of issues with that, the key issue that we found with the scanning providers is that they don't store the text or the data, past data, so they only store up to 50 days, and they don't have agreement to actually pass that text on. Yeah. So part of the solution is that we need to work out how to actually conduct that OCR ourselves.
Yes.
Thankfully, we do have sort of the images of the text in DMS stretching back several years. So we do actually have all that data there. It's just that we need to then put it in a usable form for machine learning.
Okay.
So that was the main issue that we found.
So we're not looking for an adjustment to that particular contract. We don't need that, is what we're saying.
No,
we
it's
don't.
not part of our
In
solution.
fact, to add to it, like Restore provide a service of categorization, but if you were able to bring the categorization in-house, when you rewrite the contract next time around, you can take out services. There's an unevaluated benefit there, but then because we're not privy to the details of the contract, I don't think it'd be out of place for us to suggest.
And we want to keep as light touch as possible in terms of affecting existing processes.
Fantastic, thank you.
Henry, you had a question?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Henry. Thank you very much. It was interesting. I guess the thing that jumped out a lot for me was, aren't we kind of like, isn't the approach dealing with a problem rather, like a kind of symptom rather than going to the problem? I mean, why is 9 million people, why are we getting 9 million letters when the world is digital? I personally have had to go through this problem, and it has taken me literally a year to even get responses. But I shouldn't be doing that in the first place. Everything should be digital. Now, of course, there's some people that have to do it because they're not online. However, isn't the longer term thing better to get everybody to be doing it digitally rather than doing it on handwritten?
You're exactly right. So I'm going to jump on this one first. So you're exactly right with that. The long-term solution in the future will be to move to a digital world. But I'm going to caveat this with designing a well-thought-out digital process that works for people, that is efficient, that is secure, takes a long time. And in the interim years where such a solution can be deployed, you'll have a lot of people waiting to receive refund payments and going through the same sort of struggles that we've all experienced working with correspondence with HMRC or other large departments. The point is that any well-designed digital process will take a lot of user testing, a lot of research to make sure it works for everyone. There's a lot of adjustments to be made to make it work for the millions of people who send in those forms. So I think the way to envision this is, yes, the future should be digital, but right now we're moving towards a stopgap solution that can help resolve problems for a lot of people with a fairly limited cost frame while we get adjusted to that world. I think Eric also had numbers on handwritten costs.
The ratio of electronic forms to paper post is 2 million electronic forms at the moment, 9 million letters on paper, and 4% of letters are still handwritten. So still a long way to go before everybody is digital.
Yep, okay.
Sue?
Hi, yeah, I'm Sue, and thank you. I thought your presentation really brought the issue to life for me. It was really clear. My question is about the short to medium term, really, of building a solution like this, and looking at you, maybe Eric, because it sounds like you're in and amongst this as an issue. But a lot of the things that we see as really good innovative ideas, they don't always succeed in the way that they should, because we've not brought the the users, in this case, people who are dealing with the correspondence around us. So I know a lot of the barriers that we ask you to think about and the challenges are kind of in the legal, technical, ethical space, but have you given any consideration to how you sell this to end users in HMRC and potentially other departments?
I think there's a great demand for it. To anybody who's clicked Get Next on DMS and it brings up a letter that's just totally unrelated to their work, and they have to work out and ask colleagues and check the recategorization tool. It just wastes so much time. I thought the problem was worse than it is because my particular team is a bit of a dumping ground. But there is a great demand for anybody who uses DMS. They just want the work that's for their team and not anybody else's.
Yeah, I guess the core user need that we're addressing here is that teams who are inadvertently becoming triage teams because other teams don't know where the mail should be going when that's not their role and that's not their work and it takes away from their day job time. So that is one of the key user needs we're focusing on.
And I think just to add to that, we have in this solution envisioned that we will provide the right metrics to operational excellence while the solution's being run in parallel, so the right stakeholders can be engaged with it as well. Sorry.
Yeah. So, Tim, you're obviously passionate about this, which is fantastic to see. Tell me more about what your operational stakeholders have said when you brief them on the opportunity.
Right. So, Eric, I think it's probably best. I'm going to go straight to you for this one.
Well, yeah, my manager is keen because we have wasted so much time triaging work. It's like, all right, nobody do any work for the next 3 days. We're just going to work through the queue of items and get rid of all the ones that don't belong to us. So we have to actually stop work and triage, and it's just, put them back in the queue and make them wait an extra day and be seen by what we think is the right team. It's just a source of endless complaints.
Yeah, and also from conversations with the operational excellence team who manage the kind of contract with the scanning provider, revealed to us just how bad the problem is in terms of the updating keywords that the scanning provider uses, because it requires so much business intelligence and so much. And HMRC is so big and has so many different functions that often all these keywords kind of fall out of date all the time. And so having a machine learning model that can adapt to sort of changing business environments and different teams would really help assist in that.
I think to add to that, working with DMS teams, so the team that directly managed the service rather than operational excellence, they also showed an awareness of this problem. I think to some degree they were a little bit surprised at how much we found, so that was a good sign. And working with DWP, they had indicated that because they receive a lot of correspondence, something like this is also of interest to them, because again, moving to a fully digital service takes a long time, and in the interim you need to find solutions to problems that cause inefficiencies.
Yeah, DMS team were willing to extend the AWS environment for us so that we were able to kind of deploy this type of solution.
Let me ask you a slightly different question. If you do get through to the finals, what can we expect to see as judges at the final?
Right, so I'm going to take a stab at this one first, and then people can jump in and correct me. So I think our next steps from here will be we started a conversation. The main approach with a problem like this, when you take a machine learning solution, is to make sure that you have data you can use and analyze. So our first step would be to go to DMS and data protection and make sure we did the right due diligence to set up a process of acquiring that data so that we could begin experimenting with it. We have limited small-scale access to the DMS through Eric, who's very kindly been doing a lot of analysis by hand, but we'd like to scale that analysis up to the thousands of letters and automate it so that we could provide statistics over an even larger sample size. Once we've gone through that exercise of acquiring the data and going through analyzing it, we'd then like to start training in the short term machine learning models that we could use to evaluate whether we could achieve the metrics and the performance that we'd like to replace the current solution. I think that's what the next steps would be. How much we'd be able to do in the 3 months? Up to there without the resource would be a challenge, but those would be the things I see as coming next.
I do think we have a lot of stakeholders on our side to help support us through this process, and especially the DMS team really supportive for us on that. So I think we do have a lot of momentum at the moment to carry us through the next 3 months into the final.
That's super. And you've got Aydin in the room.
You can have it all.
That's on tape.
Yeah, that's recorded.
Hi, Alison. Can you just explain maybe a point of clarification for me? Is there a relationship between the scanned digital mail that you're focusing on and the electronic mail process in terms of how that gets routed? Do we end up with the same AI thinking around sort of the training for both sets of data? Just want to make sure we don't end up with a great model for the scanned data and then a separate route for the electronic incoming mail.
Right. So, sorry, Eric.
Well, as far as I know, there's no problem with the electronic mail. The 2 million per year, they are perfectly routed to the right teams. That's fine, there's no problem with that. Separate to that
Why
is
is
the...
that, though? I mean, I'm interested in whether you can learn from that.
I think it's partly because some of the issues we identified earlier in terms of things like multiple items being put in the same envelope, things being sent to the wrong postcode. People think, I just need to send this to HMRC. It doesn't matter where in HMRC it gets sent to. Things like that, which cause a lot of problems right at the start.
Yeah. To add to that, digital solutions and digital correspondence tend to be routed to a specific inbox. So the service is designed with that in mind. As a result, digital correspondence amounts to about 2 of the 11 million pieces of correspondence we're looking at. That should be directed to the right place because of how that service is designed, but those services amount for a very small portion of the mail in comparison to physical correspondence, and it takes a long time to design the solutions and get people used to using them. So, yeah.
I suppose my point goes back to one of Henry's earlier points then, which is designing for a period of time where we don't have a fully digital service is understandable, but be careful around designing for something that's entirely bespoke and you can never converge.
I think the key thing is designing is for unstructured text as well. So also for digital correspondence, it's much more likely to be structured in a way that makes it easier to route, whereas what we're dealing with is like unstructured text for the most part of the documents that we're getting in.
And the 60% of paper post that goes to the right place, like only one step in the queue, they are mostly standard forms like P87, P1000. They have that in the corner of the form and they go to the right place. It's the 40% that aren't well labelled that are causing such a problem.
I think the final bit to add to that as well is, yes, this is a solution to route correspondence, but in general, I'd say from my experience of machine learning and data science across government, because I used to have a cross-government role before this, there's a large gap in experience when it comes to deploying machine learning models and using the cloud effectively. The solution is a stopgap measure until things move to a digital solution, but building the prototypes and getting the sort of archetypes for deploying machine learning models into production in a large department, going through the necessary clearances to get architecture to say yes.
What this is all about.
Exactly, because it enables innovation and helps us sort of let the next team who want to try an AI solution for something else drive forward. It solves a problem, but it also establishes good working practice and helps us justify to the relevant stakeholders across the department why we should have access to the tech we need to do and deliver services better.
Good answer.
Can I just
One last one. Yep.
one last one? So, so I strongly agree with that, and I really like this, despite my annoyance that I think it should all be digital in the first place. But you know, there will always be a need for it. I suppose I just want to push you a little bit on what could be done between now and the final, because it doesn't seem unreasonable to me. I founded a startup, so I'm kind of like a kind of move fast kind of take on these things. It doesn't seem unreasonable to me that you guys, you know, in terms of the costings, you need the $2,000 to do the AWS, and then the rest is actually just kind of like staff costs or what are hiring people. It doesn't seem unreasonable to me that you guys could get this spun up before the final. If the $2,000 could be found somewhere, which I'm sure it could be, and you guys could just go and start doing it yourselves and actually look into it, and you could get some results going, and you could present to us at the final we've already managed to do X, Y, and Z. So because when I'm looking at startup pitches, that is what I want to see. I want to see people who are doing stuff, like progressing each week, which I know you would do, but it feels like you could actually go quite a big leap to doing this, and you could almost get to the final and be like, we've done a whole load of work, and now we know that we don't need to just do a 6-week discovery to find out what's next. We've basically done that, or done it to a degree, and then we know that it's therefore going to cost X more to do the whole project, rather than perhaps coming back at the final and basically saying we need to do a 6-week discovery, is my one push.
Sure. I'm going to jump in on this and I'm going to turn to you, George, unless you have something to go for first. Yeah. Cool. So I agree. If we had access to the data if we could pull from DMS as we wanted, and we had access to data, and we'd gone through the right exercise of going through the DPI agreements, because this is personally identifiable information, so we have to be careful how we handle it. If we have all of those things, yes, there is no barrier for us to just pick it up and start spinning something straight away. Would we be able to do it to the same scale necessarily? Maybe not, because eventually when you start training larger and larger machine learning models, the costs become astronomical. I know when OpenAI trained their GPT-2 or 3 model, it was eye-watering sums of money. We wouldn't be proposing anywhere near that scale, but there is a limitation to how much we can do with a small amount of infrastructure costs. That would be a barrier, but if we had access to data, can we pick something up and try something straight away? I don't see any reason not to say that we can't. I think that should be doable.
And on that note, I'm going to draw things to a close to keep us on time, but perhaps you can have a think about Henry's challenge for the next stage.
Cheers.
Thank you so much. Really, really good presentation. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Thank you.